بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is Surah Fajr, which is chapter 89, verses 27 to 30. Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'in inna turji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim. And its English translation is, O soul that are at rest, return to your Lord, well pleased, well pleasing. So enter among my servants and enter my garden. I was debating about whether to speak about the history of fasting or the oath taken by the Muslim First Minister of Scotland on the Holy Quran to be obedient to King Charles. When I received the news that Chaudhry Said Ahmad Sahib, who at one time was the Imam of our mosque in Berlin and the missionary there, a very dedicated and humble missionary servant of this Jamaat, had passed away. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. By profession, he was an engineer, and throughout his life, he worked for Pakistan International Airways or Airlines. Much of the time, he was stationed at Peshawar, at the airport there, overseeing the servicing and repairs of the planes there. But wherever he was throughout his life, whether it was Peshawar, whether it was Lahore, whether it was Islamabad and Rawalpindi, he would involve himself in the activities of the local Jamaat, local organization. And when I went to Peshawar the first time, he took me to not only the Lahore Ahmadiyya Mosque in Peshawar, but also to small villages near Peshawar, where there were Ahmadi Jamaats who lived under the constant threat of annihilation, because this is, as you may know, a Taliban country, and they had fortified their houses and so on. And Chaudhry Said Sahib was kind enough to risk his life to take me there, to encourage them that when people from overseas come, they are not afraid to go and visit them, and that they stand shoulder to shoulder with them as far as they can to support their dedication and their selfless sacrifice for the Lahore Ahmadiyya Jamaat. After retirement, Chaudhry Said Ahmad Sahib dedicated and devoted himself to the work of the Jamaat full time, and he was chosen to go and serve as an Imam and missionary in Berlin under very difficult circumstances. There were many difficulties he had, apart from the fact that the mosque needed extensive renovation, as did the Imam's house. But he lacked fluency in German. He could speak a few sentences, which he picked up after he had applied for visa for Germany. He tried to learn some German, but then there was, of course, his age, his health, and not only that. You see, men in Pakistan are used to having done everything for them. Clean pressed clothes miraculously appear in their drawers and the chests of drawers and in their wardrobes and so on. Food miraculously cooked appears on the dining table. Dishes are washed, etc., etc. But when he got to Berlin, he didn't have any of these facilities. He had to learn to cook for himself. He had to learn to wash his clothes and press them, and etc. This is in addition to looking after a very old mission house where he lived, and this is in addition to looking after a very large mosque, which was in dire need of repairs. And let's not forget the garden. The mosque and the mission house has extensive gardens around them, which need weeding, and the lawn needs mowing, and etc., etc. And he had to somehow deal with all of that single-handedly. Not many people came to the mosque because the mosque had been closed for a while, because it took time to get a visa for Chaudhry Said Ahmad Sahab to get there and so on. So people thought it was derelict. So not many people came. And but he carried on. He went there to a totally strange country and city and society and culture. And he started his work there. Shortly thereafter, the Central Anjuman started the work of renovation of the mosque. And this has taken many years and had to be done in many phases. But one phase was completed during the imamship of Chaudhry Said Ahmad Sahib. At that time, Mrs. Samina Malik from Ohio, she was in charge of overseeing the renovation work and dealing with the various government departments and monument department and so on. But of course, she couldn't do the day-to-day work, as she was in Ohio, several thousand miles away. And it fell to Chaudhry Said Ahmad Sahib to deal with all the day-to-day problems of erection of scaffolding and painting being done inside and whatever else. And to make sure that during all these difficulties, during all this work, the mosque was open for prayers as well. Whether it was 5 daily prayers, whether it was Friday prayers, whether it was Eid prayers, whether it was Ramadan prayers and so on, he made sure that the mosque was open. If for some reason he wasn't there to lead the prayers, as I said, because the mosque was open, people could go in and some other person could lead the prayers. Basically, they would kind of elect an imam to lead them in prayers. The late Santu Sahib, who was the center's coordinator for the European Jamaats, he would try and help Chaudhry Said Sahib as much as he could by driving from Holland to Berlin and all this kind of thing, which Chaudhry Sahib had to go on leave. Sometimes Santu Saab would go and officiate there because Santu Saab knew a little German as well, etc. And there was an interesting comment Santu Sahib made about Chaudhry Saab. And he said Germans liked him because they thought Chaudhry Said Ahmad Saab was very holy because of his humbleness and his modesty and his gentleness and sweetness. And this is why they liked him. I visited him, I think 3 or 4 times to Berlin. The first time was, I think, with the whole family. There were 5 of us, and we drove to Berlin, and he was overjoyed to see us. And because the accommodation at the mosque is limited, he gave up his own bedroom for us and went and slept in a very small room on a very small bed. And he tried to insist that he must do all the cooking for us and all the washing up and everything, etc. Although we would say, no, how can you do that? And we would sort of try and do the cooking and so on. And he said, no, you are guests. I'm the host. And it's the host's duty to provide everything for the guests. And really, you had to sort of physically drag him away from the kitchen sink to stop him from doing the washing up and, But then he took to, in our absence, he would take to going and washing the vegetables and cutting them and so on and so forth, and etc. And his hospitality was actually amazing, not just towards us, but we saw how he treated other people who came. Most of them complete strangers. Everyone was welcomed, whether it was in the mission house or the mosque. They were entertained to tea and biscuits and cakes and so on. And however harshly they asked questions about Islam or Ahmadiyyat and so on, Chaudhry Saab would gently and in a soft manner try and answer them and answer them. Twice I visited him on my own, once for a jalsa that was arranged at the mosque. So he needed some help as well. So to help him, etc., etc. But one time I visited him on my own, and because it wasn't a jalsa time and I didn't have my family with him, that allowed me to see what his life was really like. The mosque is in a very sort of nice area of Berlin, etc. And when I visited him, it was winter. And by 4 o'clock, it was pitch dark. And there was no traffic. There was no sound from about 5 in the afternoon to until about 8 or 9 in the morning. You probably get more sound in a jungle, because at least you have crickets and other things chirping away and making a noise and so on. And after about a week, I thought, I would have a nervous breakdown. And So I mentioned this to him. I said, how do you cope in the evening? After people have gone home, you still have a few hours stretching out before him, and so on. And he just smiled and said, "Well, I'll just get on with my work." And I was amazed at his patience, that whatever circumstances he found himself in, he just carried on with his work. Whether it was in those villages around Peshawar, where his life was in danger, whether it was in Islamabad, where he lived, in what you can only describe as a palatial residence. It was large. The house next door was rented by some American agency, etc., etc. And because they were foreigners, they had arranged for extra security for themselves. But that provided security for Chaudhry Saab's house as well. But the house was full. His wife was there, his children were there, his grandchildren were there, his daughter-in-law was there, and so on. So to go from that full house to that mission house, which was in a dilapidated state, with no one, and to cope with it and deal with it and just, smile and say, well, I just get on with my work and not worry about it. It absolutely amazed me. He was a humble, kind gentleman who never complained about any hardship that he went through, not for one day or 1 week or whatever, for many years. He endured such hardship to keep the doors of the mosque open. So whenever anyone from Pakistan went to Berlin and spoke to the people there, the first question these people would ask would be, how is Chaudhry Said? Is he keeping well? And he became tremendously popular amongst the Muslim and non-Muslim people in Berlin, especially those associated with the mosque. And he was most proud of two things in his life: not his palatial house in Islamabad, etc., but he was proud of the fact that he supervised what you might call the first phase of renovation of the Berlin Mosque. And it is now fully restored. And hopefully next year there'll be the 100 years centenary celebrations there. But he was very proud of that he supervised the first phase of renovation and building of minarets, or completion of minarets which had become damaged during the Second World War and so on. And the second thing that he was proud of was that Berlin mission always had a budget deficit, and that he eliminated that budget deficit. And he used to mention that with pride. But my most vivid memory of Chaudhry Said is, we were talking about something, and about the minarets of the mosque and so on, and he embraced a minaret. And he said that people are saying that these minarets will collapse. And he said, but not while I have breath in my body. And I looked at him and he said to me, you know, my mother's jewelry is buried in these minarets. So how can I let them collapse? And he was, of course, referring to the incident when Anjuman ran short of funds to complete, the mosque was built, but minarets couldn't be built because there were no funds. And Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali made a spontaneous appeal to the ladies of the Jamaat. And he said that jewelry is an adornment that ladies like. But the minarets are an adornment of a mosque. And while you sit here with your jewelry, our mosque lacks that beauty and that adornment. And I appeal to the ladies of this Jamaat to make sacrifices to build those mosques, to build those minarets. And people who were present, Chaudhry Said was one of them, relate that gold rained down from the ladies' enclosure, which was upstairs. They had a sheet with 4 people holding each corner who were collecting this, and so much gold was donated in 1 hour that those 4 men couldn't lift that sheet. And that gold and jewelry was then sold and the minarets completed. And Chaudhry Sahib's mother was one of those ladies, and that was what he was referring to. He has left us now. Of course, he's left behind his wife and his children and their families and so on. But most of all, he has left a noble example of selfless sacrifice for the cause of the Lahore movement and propagation of Islam. He was, in the scheme of things, he could have lived in Islamabad. He passed away when he was about 100 years old, or thereabouts. And he could have spent his last years living in his comfortable house, in his palatial house in Islamabad, with servants, with his wife and children and grandchildren and so on. Not having to do any cooking or washing or even lifting a finger. And he gave it all up for the sake of making sure that the doors of the mosque in Berlin were open 5 times every day for people to go and pray. And that is why I started with the verses of the Holy Quran, chapter 89, which say, O soul, you are now at rest. Return to your Lord, well pleased and well pleasing, and enter among his servants and enter his God. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikun barrufur rahim. Alhamdulillah, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि नहमदुहु नस्तईनुहु व नस्तगफिरुहु व नुमिनु बिही व नतवक्कलु अलैहि व नऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिन शुरूरि अनफुसिना व मिन सय्यिआति अमालिना मन यहदिहिल्लाहु फला मुदिल्ल लहु व मन युद्लिलहु फला हादिय लहु व अशहदु अन ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह व अशहदु अन्ना मुहम्मदन अब्दुहु व रसूल اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واقتل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. We are not sure whether the late Chaudhry Saab's funeral has taken place in Pakistan yet, so we can't say the funeral is in absence. But inshallah, we shall do so after the Friday service next week. Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أستغفر الله. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. This is the month of Ramadan, and I want to remind you that together with the special emphasis on extra prayers and recitation of the Holy Quran and so on, you should also put extra emphasis on serving and helping humanity. There are many, many people going through difficult times, even in our own country. If your zakat and fitrana, you should give early so that it can be distributed to people so that they too may join us in celebrating Ramadan and Eid. I know many people rush in just before Eid prayers and pay the fitrana, but that is just complying with a formality. The idea is that poor can use that money to join us in the celebration of Eid. And if you only give it whatever it is 5 minutes before Eid prayers, then how are they going to join you? With that, I take my leave of you with the prayer that whoever you are and wherever you may be, may Allah keep the whole of humanity safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.